an entitled old jerk breaks into my house and begins to rifle through my belongings, demanding to speak with someone who definitely does not live at my place. Things got so bad that I told this guy that if he didn't get out of my house, I would be getting the police involved. And to this day, I'm still blown away by this crazy old man. Here's what happened. So for some context, we're in the United Kingdom. This happened about a year ago now, but I still think about this really frequently because as much as it's a pain in the butt to perpetually lock and unlock the door for the postman or for deliveries, I still think it's worth it based on this one interaction alone. A couple weeks prior, a friend of mine left a couple of items at our place and had messaged me the night before to say that he was going to cycle down the next morning to pick these bits up. Amongst our friend group, we have frequently relied on going out to look after each other, so it had been pretty common to do 1 or 2 loud knocks on the front door, then just walk into each other's houses. It was no big deal. We did it all the time, and none of us have anything in our hallways or our living rooms that we could walk in on, and we only ever did it if the other party knew we were coming. The friend I was expecting to come over the next morning is an early bird, and he knows I work from home from 9 o'clock in the morning, so he'd have to be here before then to grab his things. Well, at about 8 o'clock in the morning, I hear the front door open and slam shut, and I call down jokingly by saying, "Hey, careful with the door." I turn the corner and I'm still half asleep. It's still an hour before I need to be awake, so there's definitely no coffee in my system. And it's then that I suddenly see someone in cycling gear, facing away from me and standing in my living room. He's looking through a box of stuff we were taking to a charity shop later in the week. I say to him, "When did you get the new cycling gear?" And a man, probably in his early to mid-60s, turns around and looks shocked. I ask him, "Who are you?" To which he responds by saying, "Where's Liz?" Now, I am super confused by this. I don't know a Liz, so I ask him again. All the while, I'm being painfully polite since we're both British, and having worked in customer service for years, I just say to him, "I'm sorry, I don't know who that is. Can you please tell me who you are?" He then repeats in a more angry tone, "Where is Liz?" And I say to him, "I don't know who that is. I don't even know who you are. Please get out of my house now." His eyes flare like he's suddenly furious at how rude I am to point out he's just randomly broken into my house while also going through all of my stuff. He then says to me, "Tell me where Liz is right now." I walk to the front door and I open it. I say, "Get out now before I call the police." And when I say this, he just stares at me. So I say it again, "Get out of my house or I'll call the police." He thinks for maybe 5 seconds, which felt a lot longer at the time, before stomping out like a toddler and wrenching the front door handle out of my hand from the other side to slam it, presumably as hard as he could. I sit on the stairs to kind of decompress and come to terms with what just happened when the front door flies open again, banging on the wall. He begins to say to me with a quiet, burning fury, "You know what? Before I go, I've got a few things to say." And you know what? I don't know what he was going to say because I roared at him to get out and never return, or there will be consequences not involving the police. Well, after I said that, he bolted, but not before riding past my house on his bike a few more times over the next 5 or so minutes, all as I watched from the upstairs window. The whole situation freaked me out a bit, an unlocked door being a protection from the outside by social formality alone, and when people no longer apply the rules, it's no defense at all. Once he was gone, I was fine, but the fact that we keep our doors locked at all times now, even when we're both in the house, has kind of spoiled the group care dynamic of being able to pop in to check on each other. My best guess is either he had the wrong address or the previous tenants had beef with this guy, but he was objectively in the wrong from the very start and still acted like he was entitled to do these things, and then got aggressive once it was pointed out and acted like a bratty toddler. Now, I can't be certain for obvious reasons, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't dementia. I've had a number of relatives that had it, and whilst I know it presents in different ways in different people, this guy was way too lucid and way too dexterous. Before his very intimidating spandex ride-by, he was rolling his bike down the drive and clipping into the pedals with those very special shoes whilst looking over his shoulder at me in the window. So dementia is really unlikely, but I'm not an expert. And for the record, we do lock our door overnight, or if we're like out for long periods of time, but during the day, it was just convenient to leave it open. We live in a very small community that's generally very friendly, so we just didn't think much of it. And I think that's why this shook me up so much. It's one of those moments where you think to yourself, wow, welcome to the real world. Our friends also now have keys to our place and we have keys to theirs. So the dynamic has been kind of maintained in some degree, but it's still a sour reminder every time I'm having to go through a key just to get to their house. Wow. Wow, that is a crazy situation because I don't know how I would react if someone just walked into my house. Not to mention that he's like screaming all over the place, "Where's Liz?" Like that literally just doesn't make any sense, and there's just no reason for him to be acting that way. And I'm gonna be completely honest, as an American, this guy should count his lucky stars that he did this in the United Kingdom and not in a place like America where we would not handle that very well. There are some people who are like begging to have someone break into their house, where they're like, "Oh yay, I get to use my self-defense device," if you know what I mean. Like that really would not go well for him at all. So while it does suck that you have to start locking your door, I do have to agree with the original poster that yeah, this is kind of a taste of reality. Because you know what, despite how safe you may feel in your neighborhood, there are still some people that are absolutely insane. And in my opinion, I would rather just lock my front door instead of risking it and dealing with another crazy old man breaking into my house. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. An entitled mother gives me a panic attack, all because I asked her kid to stop running around the store. And after this interaction with this awful woman, I seriously hope I never have to deal with her ever again. Here's what happened. So I work at a secondhand shop, and we get a lot of people who come in with their kids. Obviously, kids are gonna be in public, but more often than not, the kids are rowdy and use our store as a playground. And this story is just like that. So this happened a few hours ago, and a boy who's maybe about 10 years old was running up and down our aisle between our shoes and our women's jackets. It is kind of a small aisle, and it usually is the most busy. So I called out and I said, "Hey, no running please." Not even 5 seconds pass and he does it again. Thinking maybe he didn't hear me, I said a little bit louder, "Buddy, no running please." Well, this is when our entitled mother of the story steps in. She comes out of seemingly nowhere. We have toppers that sit on the top of the racks of the clothing, most of which have pillows that make a clear view impossible, which was the case here. The entitled mother, while walking into view, yelled at me and said, "I've got it. Don't you see I'm talking to him?" Now, I felt my face turn red from embarrassment, and I muttered to no one in particular that I didn't see her. The entitled mother was going on to the man shopping with her about how someone was trying to parent someone else's child, and she was saying this right as she reached the register. Well, inside the store was also a nice lady, and she walked up next to me looking at the clothes that I was fixing and said to me that I did nothing wrong, even telling me that he was throwing stuff around the back. And when she said that, I started to tear up at her reinforcing that I was just doing my job. I grew up in an awful house where I wasn't really told that I didn't deserve to be yelled at, so it is always refreshing when someone reminds me. The entitled mother hears this and says, "If you have something to say to me, say it to me." The nice lady then responds by saying I was asking them about the color of the day. At this point, I began crying, the beginning stages of a panic attack seizing me as the two began to go back and forth. There were two ladies on the other side of the rack that I was working on who didn't speak English but tried to help by reaching out for my hand and reminding me to breathe. I heard a little bit of their exchange, but was a little focused on trying to convince my body that air actually was entering my lungs. The nice lady walked towards the same register as the entitled mother, and the little bit I caught roughly goes like this. The nice lady was remarking that I'm upset, and the entitled mother said, "I'm recording you, I am recording you." And from what my coworker said later, the nice lady told my coworker to call for one of our managers right away. The nice lady returned to where I was, rubbing my back, and was also trying to remind me to keep breathing. Now, I was hyperventilating at this point, the worst panic attack I've had thus far. You know the old box TVs? The static that would appear on the glass after turning it off, or just look it up on YouTube for TV static? That's what my hands felt like. I couldn't feel my legs and was sure that if I moved, I would fall over. They let me watch the cameras to explain everything to the managers later on, and you can see how red my face was and how panicked my breathing was. My coworker finished ringing up the entitled mom and her family, and they very quickly left the store. He appeared a few feet away from me, trying to see what he could do to help. Our manager did the same, having not been clued in yet. The nice lady said to my manager, "That lady needs to be banned." I'm not sure what exactly she said after that, because this was when I discovered that I was so deep in a panic attack that I couldn't even speak. I somehow managed to get out the words, "I'm having a panic attack." My coworker ended up helping me walk to the back and to the break room. He sat me in one of the chairs and stayed with me until I could talk. He even went to get my water from my own register. My hands were shaking like a leaf and my teeth started chattering as I tried to slow my breathing and compare stories with him. He went back out on the floor and I took a few minutes. I relayed everything that I caught and that that my coworker had told me to both managers on duty, and the three of us watched the cameras where I gave them a kind of play-by-play of what happened. Everyone, my managers, coworkers, and customers, all agreed that the entitled mother was a jerk and a grunt and should have been parenting her child instead of letting him run around the store like a hooligan. The nice lady ended up leaving without buying anything because the entitled mother made her so mad, which I feel really bad for because I wanted to thank her. And honestly, with all things considered, I really hope I never have to deal with her ever again. Wow, the behavior of that entitled mom was completely out of line. There's literally no good reason for the way she acted. She could have just watched her kid and not allowed it to like run up and down the aisles, but instead she decided to take it out on you, acting like you're trying to parent her child. It's like, no buddy, I'm just trying to do my job and prevent your stupid kid from throwing more things around the store. So with all things considered, I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. I can only imagine how hard that must have been, and hopefully for the sake of your employment at that job, you never have to deal with that lady ever again. An entitled jerk mistakes my security measures for a scam and loses his mind after I was just trying to get his order correct over the phone. And I'm honestly still blown away by how paranoid this guy was acting. Here's what happened. About 10 years ago, I worked phone customer service for a particularly famous New England candle company. As with all customer service jobs, you get some wild stuff, but this story definitely takes the cake. I had a guy call in who had received an email that something he'd ordered on sale had run out of stock, and since the sale was technically over, he was advised to call us if he wanted a replacement item for the sales price. I think they had a few days to do this before the refund automatically processed, and I guess at the time this is just how the candle company handled it. Now, things went fine. He picked out a replacement, I went to process it, and asked for his last four and security code of his credit card to confirm the order. Well, when I asked for this, his tone took a total 180. I mean, I could pretty much hear his scowl over the phone, and he told me he already had his card on file with us. Now, I agreed that he did, but I wanted to verify his last four, and I had no way of seeing his security code at all, and I needed to input it to process the replacement. I politely told him if he needed to step away to grab his card, I would wait, or he could call back and we could resume. Well, when I said that, this guy lost his mind. He started yelling that the phone line wasn't secure and that he knew he was being recorded, which, yeah, he was. The automated recording had advised as such at the start of the call, which is pretty standard procedure for call centers. He wasn't giving up such important information to a stranger, and also, I should have already known it anyways, since he'd saved it on the website, so I should be able to see it. I mean, when he said this, he almost sounded proud of this, like he was standing up to some big bad corporation messing with his money, and not just yelling at a 20-something at a seasonal job trying to replace their stupid candle. I tried to explain that if I could process orders without verifying his card on file, any random could call in, claim to be him, and rack up as much as they wanted on his card. Well, he snarled that no one does that, and I had his permission to process orders under his account without verifying. Now, I was still new and I was a little flustered, so I probably didn't explain myself well as I tried to get him to come around, but eventually he decided the entire thing was a scam, that we, the call center, weren't actually affiliated with this candle company, and he was just a budding victim of fraud. He told me to just process his refund and just forget about it. So I did just that, but he literally did not believe me because it didn't immediately post to his bank account, and he informed me that he was going to call the real candle company just to report that people were using their name to scam him. Well, fast forward and I looked at the call record a little bit later, and I found out that he had in fact called the real candle company again. He got my coworker and swiftly hung up on them when they told him the same thing. And honestly, I just don't know what happened to people like this that seem to make them so paranoid. Yeah, this is so weird to me. I've worked customer service as well as call center jobs like this, so I really know exactly what the original poster is currently going through. Like, this kind of behavior is obnoxious and so frustrating to deal with, because here you are just trying to do your job and process this like new item for them, but they want to sit there and act like someone's tracking their information. It's like, dude, you're probably nobody that anybody is ever going to try and look for. Just give me the numbers that I need so I can process your stupid candle. So I personally find this story super relatable because people who act like this truly are completely delusional. Today, I messed up by thinking that my neighbor's dog was a stray, and now that I got caught trying to lure the dog over to me just to take care of it, I now feel entirely embarrassed and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So we have 5 neighbors bordering my large yard. 3 of them have dogs, as do I, and I know these dogs really well. I did not think the other 2 neighbors had dogs, as none of us have fences, and I had only ever seen the dogs that I knew. knew. I was out with my pup this morning doing yard work, and he was hanging out on the porch while I was bringing a wheelbarrow of stuff down to the compost pile. I was daydreaming and not paying attention all the way up until I heard growling. I looked up, and in the middle of our yard was a large breed copper and white dog. We have 4 acres, so while the yard isn't gigantic, it was solidly within our property. His long fur was well groomed and he had a collar, so I knew he hadn't been wandering for long. Since I knew he wasn't one of the neighbor's dogs, I assumed his owners lived in the general vicinity but not right next door, and that he had recently escaped. He stood his ground, barking warning barks at me. My pup came running to investigate the noise, as he thinks that every dog is friendly, and I'm so thankful that the other dog stayed put, as I told mine to stop approaching. I brought my dog inside, and by the time I returned, the strange dog had wandered onto one of the neighbor's properties. Now, we have a 50-mile-an-hour road a couple houses away that most people go about 60 on. I was worried, and I wanted to help return the dog if I could, but I didn't want to trespass just to do that. So I started calling out key words from the corner of my yard. I would say stuff like, "Do you want to eat? Do you want some food? You want a cookie? How about some treats? You want some treats?" I did ask the dog a couple of times if that was his house, not because I expected an answer, obviously, but because I was trying to make friendly toned small talk with him. So it crossed my mind, but nobody was visibly around, and I didn't really believe it. Then an older gentleman shuffles out of the house, clearly trying to discern what's going on. I call out asking if the dog is his, and he says yes. I say to him, "Oh, okay, he was in my yard and I wanted to make sure he was safe." He asked if the dog was bothering me, and I said no. But you know what? In hindsight, I should have said yes, since I still don't know how the dog will get along with mine. But he was incredibly unimpressed with me, and now I'm just completely embarrassed. Obviously, I know my heart was in the right place, but if I left my house to find someone trying to lure my dog away, I would probably be very upset as well. Honestly, I don't think you did anything wrong. Here you see a strange dog that you've never seen before, and you're just trying to figure out where it came from and why it's sitting there staring at you. Like the dog was barking in your yard and you didn't know whose dog it belonged to. Like if I was in your shoes, I would probably do the same thing. I would try to get the dog to me to see if there's any kind of tags or anything like that, just so I can then try to bring the dog home. So no, in my opinion, I don't think you messed up at all. If anything, I think you did a really good thing for you and your neighborhood. And if your neighbor didn't like the fact that you were looking after his dog, then maybe he should have kept a better eye on him instead of letting him just roam around. Am I the jerk for telling my family to stay out of mine and my wife's room after they've invaded our space consistently for way too long? Because right now, a lot of tension is in my house, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. I'm a 27-year-old male, and I live with my wife who's 26 years old. We got married 3 years ago and have been living together ever since then, and we are the only people who live in our home. My parents are both addicted to gambling and lost their car and house to it last month. I also have 3 little siblings, a sister who's 23, and 2 brothers who are 17 and 15. Since they didn't have any place to live anymore, they asked if they could come and live with my wife and I, and she agreed, but I was a little hesitant because I know how they can be. Anyways, they did end up moving in, but the problem is they were way too noisy and keep invading me and my wife's personal space. She's the absolute sweetest, and even though she's visibly really uncomfortable with all of this, she never says anything. Now, my sister isn't really the problem here because she decided to move out for my wife and I's sake. She and my wife are really close too, so she understood. But my brothers are being a menace. They keep touching my books, computer, and any other possible thing they can find. And because the house is so small, they usually spend most of their time in our room. My wife and I have no privacy anymore. In fact, just yesterday, we were all sitting in our room at night, and my wife and I were doing some work when suddenly my brothers opened our drawers and pulled out some private things they had no business looking into, and they then started laughing out loud, looking at me and my wife. Well, my wife got really embarrassed and then left. She said she doesn't want to stay in the house for the night and decided to go to her parents' house, and I'm now worried this might cause a big issue. I yelled at my brothers for their behavior, but my parents came in and said that I was being too proud, all because I have a house, and that I'm treating them too poorly. But here's the thing, I told them once already that I feel uncomfortable with the way they behave. They didn't even scold my brothers and just started a whole fight which went on for the entire night. Well, my wife still doesn't want to come back for a few days, and I'm feeling very scared. I don't want to lose the love of my life to this, but I can't kick my family out either because they have nowhere else to go. Now, trust me, this incident was not the only one. In fact, my mother once walked walked in on my wife showering because according to her, it's okay because they're both women. My wife didn't like that, but again, she didn't say anything about it either, and I'm now afraid this might cause a strain in our marriage, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, first off, you are definitely not the jerk, but secondly, I think it's time for them to move out. The original poster went on to explain that this is literally a house with only 2 bedrooms. There is no space anywhere for anybody, and the fact that the parents and the siblings are not being more considerate of like the space available, or even being considerate of your house in general is honestly mind-blowing to me. Like, that is simply unfair. You let them into your house as a good favor. You're literally just trying to help them out so they don't end up homeless, and then here they are turning around making this into something awful for you. So no, you are definitely not the jerk, and I think for the sake of your wife, it is definitely time to tell them to get out, because they very clearly have overstayed their welcome before they even got settled, and that is something that you absolutely cannot ignore. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.